By 4:30, I'd already reheated the spaghetti sauce, once answered 3 client emails with Sophie's pink recital flower between my teeth, and checked my phone enough times to make myself feel stupid. That was the first thing that felt wrong that night. Not that Ryan was late. Ryan had been late in 100 ordinary ways over the last year. It was the quiet confidence of it. The way he had texted me at 3:58 running a little behind, "Don't wait for me to leave," and then gone still like I was supposed to fold the rest of the evening around that and call it normal. Sophie was in the living room in white tights and black patent shoes, pressing the same 5 notes on her little keyboard, with the fierce concentration only 6-year-olds and surgeons seem to have. "Too loud," she called. "Not if you're trying to scare the neighbors," I said, pinning the flower to the top of the paper gift bag the recital teacher had asked us to bring. She laughed, and for half a second the house sounded like the version of my life I had spent the last 3 years protecting. Warm kitchen light, homework on the table, a tiny performance dress hanging from the pantry door because I hadn't wanted it wrinkled on the couch. My bookkeeping spreadsheet still open on my laptop at the end of the counter because one of Ryan's vendors had sent another invoice to my email instead of his. That had become normal too. His business, my inbox, his stress, my schedule. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and texted him again. "What time are you getting there?" No answer. I looked around the kitchen the way I always did when I was trying not to feel something directly. Sophie's water bottle on the counter, the recital permission slip magnet clipped to the fridge, the fruit bowl I kept forgetting to refill. The house was full of me in ways that didn't show unless I stopped moving. Every cushion fluffed, every bill remembered, every school deadline caught before it became a problem. It wasn't glamorous work, it was load-bearing work, the kind nobody noticed until it stopped. Mom Sophie was suddenly in the doorway, small and serious in her recital dress. "Do I look pretty or weird?" I turned and felt that familiar ache mothers get when their kid looks both exactly like a baby and not like a baby at all. "You look beautiful," I said, "and a little dangerous." She smiled. "Good." I crouched and smoothed the front of her dress. "Daddy might be late, okay, but he said he'll meet us there." Her face changed only a little. Sophie had gotten good at that too. "Is he working?" "Probably." That was the easiest lie in our marriage because it was sometimes true. By the time I got Sophie buckled in and drove us to the elementary school auditorium, dusk had gone blue across the parking lot. Parents were already carrying folding flowers and phone chargers and the overbright energy people bring to small public milestones. I parked under a dead streetlight and checked my phone again before I even cut the engine. Nothing. Sophie was chattering about who might mess up first on stage and whether she should wave if she saw me in the audience. I answered her, smiled when I was supposed to carry the flower bag and her sweater and the emergency bobby pins I'd shoved into my purse, and kept feeling that thin, tight thread of irritation under everything. Inside, the school smelled like floor wax and construction paper and overheated air. Parents clustered in the hallway outside the auditorium doors while kids were directed toward the music room to line up. I signed Sophie in, kissed the top of her head, and watched her disappear into the little current of shiny shoes and nervous shoulders. "Emily." I turned. Megan Alvarez was standing near the trophy case with a travel mug in one hand and that look people get when they're trying to act normal 1 second too hard. "Hey," I said. Her smile came late. "Sophie looks adorable." "Thank you." She glanced past me toward the entrance, then back. "Ryan coming?" Supposedly. Something shifted in her face. Not surprise. Not exactly. "He said he was running behind." I added, hearing how automatic and defensive I sounded. "Right," Megan said. Yeah, that should have been nothing, one tired mom agreeing with another, but she kept touching the cardboard sleeve on her coffee like her hand needed a job, and when another parent walked up to say hi, Megan got a little too grateful for the interruption. I laughed once under my breath, but there was no humor in it. It was amazing how quickly a room could start feeling strange before you had a single fact to justify it. I took my seat 3 rows from the front left side where Sophie could spot me if she got nervous. Parents kept filing in around me, shedding coats, checking programs, angling their phones toward the stage. A man behind me was explaining to someone in a whisper that his daughter had practiced one song so many times their dog now howled when she heard the first note. Somebody else was opening a peppermint. A little boy in the back started crying because he thought all recitals were secretly graduations. My phone lit up at 6:52. Here, I exhaled like my body had been waiting for permission. Then I turned. Ryan was standing near the back doors with a woman I'd seen exactly twice before at one of his business mixers. Claire. I knew her name before my brain caught up to my stomach. Claire Dalton. Dark blonde hair, camel coat, clean makeup, that polished, expensive kind of pretty that looked effortless until you knew how much effort it took. She was standing close enough to Ryan that there was no socially innocent way to read the distance between them. Not touching. Worse, comfortable. Ryan saw me and lifted his chin once, almost casually, like he was late to a dentist appointment and not walking into our daughter's recital with another woman at his side. My whole body went cold first, and then hot so fast it made me dizzy. For one stupid second I actually thought maybe I was misreading it. Maybe she was meeting someone else. Maybe they'd run into each other outside. Maybe he would peel away from her and come sit beside me with that apologetic face I'd once been so eager to forgive. He didn't. He leaned down and said something to her. She smiled. Then they started walking toward the seats, toward me. The room around me kept moving. Programs rustled. Someone laughed. The stage curtain fluttered once from the vent overhead, and I had the sickest sensation that the world had split, not because something impossible was happening, but because something deliberate was happening in a place where I was socially trapped from reacting the way a human being should. Ryan stopped at the end of my row. "Hey," he said quietly, like we were late to a movie. "Sorry." Claire gave me a small, controlled smile. Not smug, not warm, either. The kind of smile women use when they've been told a situation is complicated and want credit for handling it with grace. I stared at him. He actually had the nerve to look mildly uncomfortable, like my face was the first unpredictable element of the night. Then Sophie appeared at the side of the stage with the rest of the kids lining up by height, and I saw her eyes scanning the audience. That saved him. Not in the long run, but in that exact second it saved him from the scene he deserved. I stood up before either of them could sit. "You need to move," I said to Ryan. His voice dropped lower. "Emily." "Not here." It came out quiet, but something in it made Claire take half a step back. Ryan glanced toward the stage, then back at me, already irritated that I was making logistics difficult. "She's just here because I do not care why she's here," I said. "You are not sitting beside me with her in front of our daughter." He gave me that look I had started seeing more over the last few months. Not guilt. Management. Like the real issue was whether I was going to be reasonable enough to help him keep things tidy. "Let's not do this right now," he said. Behind me somebody shifted in their seat. I could feel the awareness spreading without anyone openly staring. That was the humiliating thing about public moments like that. The room never fully looked at you, but it made space around you anyway. Megan appeared at the aisle from nowhere. "Emily," she said softly, touching my elbow. "Do you want to switch with me?" I looked at her, and whatever she saw in my face made hers fall. "Yes," I said. Ryan stepped back. Claire stayed silent. Megan moved into my row like she'd rehearsed emergencies for women her whole life. I sat down again because Sophie was still looking for me, and when she found me I lifted my hand and smiled the way mothers do when their heart is breaking in a public building and they need their kid to walk on stage thinking home is still intact. Sophie smiled back, small and relieved, and then the music teacher began speaking into the microphone. I don't remember the first song. I remember Claire's coat folded over the seat beside Ryan 2 rows back. I remember his hand on his knee, steady as a man waiting out a rainstorm. I remember Megan sitting beside me so stiffly she might as well have been holding up the wall. I remember how every sweet childish note from the stage felt like it was being laid down over something rotten. Halfway through the second song, Sophie glanced toward the audience again. Her eyes found Ryan, then Claire, then me. She missed a note. It was tiny. Maybe nobody else heard it. I did. A little break in the pattern. A child trying to understand a room while still playing inside it. My throat tightened so hard I thought I might choke. Megan leaned toward me without taking her eyes off the stage. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. That wasn't enough information, but it was too much at the same time. For what I whispered back. She swallowed. "I'm sorry." I looked at her profile, the set mouth, the guilt, the fact that she had not looked surprised when I said Ryan was supposed to be coming, and then all at once the last 2 months rearranged themselves. Ryan being weirdly careful with his phone but less careful with his tone. 2 separate people at school asking if I was doing okay in voices that felt too prepared. A woman from Ryan's networking group hugging me too long at a fundraiser and saying marriage is hard. Be gentle with yourself when I had not told her there was anything to be gentle about. He had been laying track. By the time the recital ended, my face hurt from holding it together. Sophie came running into the hallway afterward with the paper flower bag clutched against her chest. "Did you see me?" she asked. "Did I mess up?" "No, baby," I said, immediately kneeling. "You were amazing." She looked past me. "Daddy." Ryan had come into the hallway alone. Claire was farther back near the cafeteria doors, pretending to be interested in the student artwork taped along the wall. That somehow made everything worse. The caution, the staging, the idea that they had thought this through just enough to imagine it might pass. Ryan crouched beside us. "You did great, Soph." Sophie's smile came but slower this time. She looked between us with the awful alertness children get when they don't understand a problem but know it has their name somewhere inside it. "You got me flowers?" she asked. "I left them in the car," Ryan said. "Of course he did." I stood up. "We're going home." Ryan rose too. "Emily, can we not?" "No." He lowered his voice, trying for reasonable. "Sophie deserves normal." I looked at him, then really looked at him. At the smooth forehead, the calm tone, the absolute arrogance of a man who had brought another woman into our daughter's recital and still thought he got to define what counted as normal. "She deserved her father to show up alone," I said. His jaw tightened. "You're making this bigger than." Megan stepped into the space beside me before he could finish. "Ryan," she said, flat enough to stop him. "Not now." He looked at her, then at me, and I saw it clearly for the first time. He wasn't panicking because he didn't think he had to. He thought the room was survivable, prepared, softened. He thought I would go home, cry privately, maybe argue later, but not truly interrupt the version of events he had already started building. Claire was still standing at the end of the hall, and when our eyes met, hers flicked away first. That mattered more than I wanted it to. I took Sophie's hand and started toward the doors. "Emily," Megan said behind me. I turned back. She came closer, keeping her voice low enough that Sophie wouldn't catch the shape of it. "I need to tell you something before somebody else makes this worse," she said. I waited. Her eyes filled with the kind of shame honest people get when they realize silence helped the wrong person. "He's been talking," she said quietly. Not outright, but enough, like things were basically over. Like you'd checked out, like tonight wouldn't look as bad as it does. For a second, I honestly couldn't feel my hands, not because I hadn't suspected something, because hearing it said out loud turned humiliation into architecture. This hadn't been one selfish impulse, it had been built. Ryan had not walked into that recital hoping I would understand. He had walked in believing other people already did. Sophie tugged on my fingers. "Mom," I looked down at her, then back at Megan, then past both of them to Ryan standing in the fluorescent school hallway, like a man who had mistaken my quiet for absence. "Thank you," I said, though my voice didn't sound like mine. Then I took my daughter and walked out into the cold, knowing I was no longer dealing with a marriage that was privately failing. I was dealing with the story my husband had already started telling without me. I got Sophie into her car seat with hands that felt steady only because I needed them to. She kept the recital flower bag in her lap all the way home, one hand smoothing the crinkled tissue paper every few minutes like she was trying to flatten the night back into something safe. The streetlights kept sliding across her face in little orange bars. I could see her watching me in the rearview mirror the way kids do when they know something happened but don't have the language for it yet. "Did I do bad?" she asked quietly. The question hit me so hard I had to tighten my grip on the steering wheel. "No, baby," I said. "You did beautiful." She looked down at the flower again. "Then why were you mad?" I swallowed. There are questions motherhood doesn't prepare you for, not because they are too complicated, but because they are too clean. "I wasn't mad at you." "I know." She rubbed the edge of the paper bag with her thumb. "Were you mad at Daddy?" The house came into view at the end of the block, our porch light still on because I always left it on when one of us came home after dark. I pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, but neither of us moved right away. "A little," I said finally. She nodded like that made sense. Then in the small voice she used when she was trying not to ask for too much, she said, "I didn't know if I should wave at both of them." That was the moment the humiliation stopped being mine alone. I closed my eyes for half a second and felt the shape of it settle in. Ryan had not just embarrassed me in a hallway, he had handed our 6-year-old daughter a social problem she should never have had to solve from a stage. I got out, came around and opened her door. She let me unbuckle her without talking. Inside, I microwaved milk she barely touched, got her into pajamas, and sat on the edge of her bed while she lined up her stuffed animals in a row that was straighter than usual. "Is Daddy coming home?" she asked. "I think so." That answer used to be neutral in our house. It didn't feel neutral anymore. She looked at me. "Will you still come to my next recital?" The heartbreak of that was almost elegant in its cruelty. Not "will Daddy come?" Not "are you guys okay?" Just the first thing she needed to know after tonight. Would her mother still be there? "Yes," I said, touching her cheek. "Always." She accepted that right away. Kids don't ask the same question twice when they believe you. When I came downstairs, the house felt changed in a way I can only describe as personal. Same lamp on in the living room. Same folded throw blanket on the couch arm. Same stack of unopened mail by my laptop. But everything looked slightly rearranged by knowledge. As if the rooms themselves had overheard something and could no longer pretend not to. I stood in the kitchen and replayed the whole way at school, the way people worry a bruise with their thumb. Claire's coat, Ryan's face, Megan's expression. The thing that wouldn't let me breathe evenly wasn't even the sight of him with another woman anymore. It was the confidence. He had not looked like a man caught. He had looked like a man managing logistics. My phone buzzed on the counter. Megan. I answered on the second ring. Hey, she said, and her voice already sounded guilty. Hi. I should have told you sooner. I leaned back against the counter. Told me what exactly, she exhaled. He's been talking in circles for a while. I said nothing. Not openly, she added quickly. Not like, I'm leaving my wife and here's my new girlfriend. Nothing that clear, but enough that people could fill in the rest. He kept saying things were hard at home, that you'd grown apart, that you were overwhelmed all the time, that he was trying to keep things stable for Sophie. Each sentence landed with its own fresh humiliation because I could hear exactly how believable it would sound to other people. I was overwhelmed. I did keep the house together with duct tape and lists and low-level panic. I had been tired. I had been quieter. I had stopped asking Ryan direct questions in the exact month he would have needed that silence most. He made me sound like the difficult one, I said. Megan hesitated. He made you sound gone already. Emotionally, I mean. I looked around my kitchen. Sophie's purple lunchbox drying by the sink, Ryan's protein powder tub shoved beside the toaster because he never put it back in the pantry. The invoice spreadsheet still glowing on my laptop screen because I had spent my afternoon doing accounts for his company before taking our daughter to perform. Gone already. That almost made me laugh. Why didn't you say anything, I asked, and I wasn't even angry at her. Not really. Just hollow. I didn't know how serious it was, she said softly. And honestly, at first, I thought maybe you knew. Then tonight, she stopped. I'm sorry, Emily. The way he walked in with her, he did not look like a man making a mistake. He looked like a man counting on everybody to adjust. After we hung up, I stood in the dark kitchen with my phone in my hand until the screen went black. Then Ryan came home. I heard his car before I saw him. Headlights cut across the front window, then disappeared. A car door shut. His keys hit the bowl by the entryway with that familiar little metal clatter that had once made me feel relieved because it meant another day had ended with us both under the same roof. He walked into the kitchen like he had spent the drive rehearsing patience. Is Sophie asleep? Yes. He nodded. Good. That was it. Not I'm sorry. Not I know that was awful. Just good, as if the main success of the evening was that our daughter had been safely removed from the fallout he created. I folded my arms. Who exactly did you think that looked normal to? He exhaled through his nose and went to the fridge for water. Even that made me angrier than if he had shouted. The ordinary movements. The ownership. Emily, I didn't bring Claire there to hurt you. Really. She was with me already. We came from the same thing. You brought her into our daughter's recital. You're making it sound more dramatic than it was. I stared at him. He unscrewed the bottle cap. We've both known things haven't been good for a while. That sentence changed the air. Not because it was surprising. Because of how carefully it slid past the point. He was already trying to put us inside a shared narrative where the real offense wasn't betrayal. It was that I was refusing the mature, evolved framing of it. We have not both known, I said. You have been acting like a man, slowly clearing me out of the room while I was still packing lunches in it. He shook his head, irritated now. You hear one thing from Megan or whoever and suddenly I'm the villain. One thing, I said. You walked in with another woman. He finally looked at me fully. Claire is not the issue. I laughed once, sharp enough to surprise us both. That is the first honest thing you've said. He set the bottle down. You've been checked out for months, Emily. There it was. Clean. Finished. Something he had been saying elsewhere long enough that it now came out polished. I have been working, parenting, paying bills, keeping your business from bleeding through our walls, and trying not to start fights in front of Sophia, I said. If that looked like being checked out to you, that says more about what you use me for than who I am. His face hardened in a way I hadn't seen often but enough to recognize. It was the expression he wore whenever gratitude was being requested from the wrong person. I'm not doing this tonight, he said. You already did it tonight. He picked up his bottle again, then put it back down when he saw I wasn't moving. I'm tired. You're upset. We can talk when this isn't so fresh. That was when I understood something I should have understood earlier. Ryan didn't think he needed to win the truth. He thought he only needed to survive the timing. He believed if he let my pain cool down, his version of the marriage would keep feeling more reasonable than mine. He went upstairs. I didn't follow him. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table until the house went fully still and started remembering things in order. My mother's inheritance had never been large enough to change my life in the glamorous sense. It was the kind of money that mattered to ordinary people enough for a real down payment if you were careful enough to stop panic from becoming ruin, if you moved quickly enough to shape a future, if you used it before somebody louder convinced you not to. When Ryan and I bought this house, he told everybody we were lucky to get in when we did. He said it with the broad smile people use when they want their life to look self-made. I let him say it because at 23 I still thought love meant not correcting every theft of emphasis. The down payment had come from my mother's account. 3 years later, when Ryan's business nearly folded after a supplier mess and 2 contracts fell through, I sat at this same table with refinance paperwork and tax records and moved the last safe piece of that inheritance into saving the mortgage while Ryan walked circles through the living room saying he just needed 1 clean quarter to fix everything. He had thanked me then. I think he had even cried. But gratitude is not the same thing as memory, not when it doesn't flatter a man's self-image. Around midnight, I got up and walked through the house without turning on many lights. The living room rug I had chosen because Sophie liked lying on it to color. The dent in the hall wall from when we moved in and Ryan swore he'd patch it that weekend. The guest room closet where I kept the document box because I was the one who always knew where real things lived. I pulled the box down and carried it to the dining table. Inside were labeled folders: mortgage, refinance, closing docs, insurance, tax records. Everything in my handwriting because Ryan's relationship to paperwork had always been emotional. He liked documents when they affirmed him and lost interest when they required humility. I found the folder I wanted and sat there cross-legged on the floor, flipping through copies until I reached the closing statement and the contribution records. My pulse slowed the way it does when pain finally gets one factual edge to hold on to. At 9 the next morning, after Sophie left for school with circles under her eyes and a hesitant hug that lasted longer than usual, I called Janice Bennett. She answered the way she always did, as if calm was a service she offered on purpose. "Emily, honey. You okay?" I looked at the papers spread across the table. "No. But I need to know something before I decide how not okay." That got a small sad sound out of her. "Talk to me." I did. Not every detail. I couldn't yet, but enough. She didn't interrupt. When I finally stopped, she said, "Your mother would have told you to stop apologizing inside your own head for seeing clearly." My throat tightened. "Janice," I said, "the house." "Yes, I remember how we did it. I remember the inheritance and the down payment and the refinance, but I need you to tell me whether I'm remembering emotionally or correctly." "You're remembering correctly," she said, "and those are not the same thing." I sat back against the cabinet and closed my eyes. She went on in that steady, practical tone of hers. The original contribution, the records we kept, the way we structured things because she had insisted my mother's money not just vanish into marital fog. She didn't make it sound dramatic. That was exactly why it hit so hard. She made it sound what it was real. "Ryan may have forgotten," she said, "but forgetting is not the same thing as changing." I let that settle. Then she added more quietly, "Warmth is not surrender, Emily. Your mother knew that. I know you know it too." After we hung up, I looked around the kitchen again. Not like a wounded wife this time. Like a woman standing inside evidence. Ryan had brought Claire to the recital like I was already gone. Like the house, the child, the life, the whole structure of things would just lean in the direction he pointed because he had gotten there first with his version. He had mistaken my silence for vacancy. He had mistaken my labor for atmosphere. He had mistaken the house for his stage because he had never really respected what held it up. I gathered the documents back into one stack, neat and deliberate. Then I set them in the center of the dining table where Ryan couldn't miss them when he came home. By the time I heard his car in the driveway that evening, I wasn't shaking anymore. By the time Ryan opened the front door, the house was quiet in that thin, alert way houses get when one person inside is waiting for the truth to finally stop wearing a coat and come all the way in. Sophie was asleep upstairs. I had checked on her twice already. Her recital dress was draped over the rocking chair in her room, one white tight half hanging toward the floor. I'd stood there longer than I needed to, looking at her little hand curled under her cheek, and promised myself that whatever happened next would not happen inside her hearing. Downstairs, the dining table was cleared except for one neat stack of papers, my mother's old blue ceramic coaster, and the water glass I hadn't touched. Ryan came into the kitchen, loosened his tie, and saw me standing by the table. He glanced at the papers. What's this? The casualness of it almost impressed me. He still thought this was going to be another conversation he could flatten with tone. We need to talk now, I said. He set his keys down. Emily, I'm really not doing another late-night spiral. That would have hit me 2 days earlier. Not because it was true, but because I was still vulnerable to the shape of his language. Spiral. Dramatic. Overwhelmed. He'd spent months sanding me down with words like that until any strong feeling I had started sounding excessive even inside my own head. But I wasn't standing in that version of the marriage anymore. This isn't a spiral, I said. Sit down. He looked at me for a second. Something in my face must have changed because he actually did. He sat across from me at the same table where I had once signed refinance papers with my mother's money while he paced the kitchen telling me he'd make it up to me when the business stabilized. I remembered his hands shaking back then. I remembered feeling more like his partner than his wife, more like the person holding the roof up than the person living under it. Now he leaned back in the chair and exhaled through his nose like I was a delay in his evening. Okay, he said. Say what you need to say. I sat down too, but I didn't touch the papers yet. The recital was not the beginning of this, I said. It was the first time you got careless enough to do in public what you've already been doing in private. His jaw shifted. I didn't bring Claire there to humiliate you. You brought another woman to our daughter's recital and acted like I was supposed to adjust around it. That is not what happened. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. That is exactly what happened. You just don't like how it sounds when somebody else says it plainly. He rubbed a hand over his mouth. Things have been bad between us for a while. Yes, I said. Because I've been carrying a marriage you were already leaving. That's not fair. No, Ryan. What wasn't fair was letting me keep doing all the work while you slowly explained me to other people like I was the reason your life had become so difficult. His expression changed then. Not guilt, annoyance. He hated being described accurately when the description didn't flatter him. I vented, he said. To a few people. That's what happens when a marriage is struggling. No. You curated. He looked at me sharply. That's what Megan told me, I said. Not that you were devastated. Not that you were confused. That you had already started telling people I was checked out, overwhelmed, hard to reach. You didn't need everyone to know the truth. You just needed them to accept your version before I knew there was a version being told. He opened his mouth, but I kept going. And then you brought Claire into Sophie's recital like the room would hold for you. He sat back. I'm not going to apologize for trying to move forward. That sentence settled something in me for good, not because it hurt most, because it clarified most. Move forward, as if the life behind him had simply become inconvenient furniture, as if the woman who had been paying bills, answering vendor emails, packing lunches, and holding his business together from the kitchen table was just an emotional phase he had outgrown. I finally put my hand on the stack of papers. You forgot something, I said. His eyes dropped to the folder. What now, the house? He frowned almost impatiently. What about it? I slid the top paper across the table toward him. He glanced at it and barely reacted at first. Closing statement, contribution record, just paperwork to him. Ryan had always treated documents like weather reports important only if they personally flattered him. I'm not sure what point you think you're making, he said. The down payment came from my mother's inheritance. I know that. Do you? I asked. Because you've been acting like I'm a guest in a life you built. He looked at me again, more carefully this time. I slid the next paper toward him. Then the refinance record. When your business nearly collapsed, I said, and we were 3 weeks from falling behind on the mortgage, I used the rest of what my mother left me to keep this house. I sat right here and did that while you walked circles through the living room talking about how stressed you were. His face tightened. That was years ago. Yes, I said. And I have been paying for your ability to forget it ever since. He straightened in his chair. You're twisting this into something it's not. No, I said. I'm taking it out of the sentimental fog you like to keep it in. I pulled the last document forward and laid it flat between us. This house is not just emotionally mine, Ryan. It is structurally tied to money that came from my mother and paperwork you never bothered to understand because understanding it would have required you to admit that your stability was built partly by me. For the first time all night, he didn't answer right away. I watched him read, watched his expression change in small stages. Irritation first, then concentration, then the tiniest flicker of something close to disbelief. Janice told you all this, he asked. No, I said. Janice confirmed what I already knew. He looked up fast. You called Janice, yes, so now you're turning this into some legal thing. That was the moment I knew he was scared. Not because I had threatened him. Because he still needed this to be about my tone, my timing, my emotions. Anything but the reality that he had made himself socially bold from a practical position he did not fully own. This became a legal thing the day you started acting like I could be replaced inside a house I paid to secure, I said. His hand flattened on the table. I never said you were replaceable. You brought another woman to our daughter's recital. His voice sharpened. I said I was trying to move forward. And I'm telling you, I said that you tried to move forward by stepping on my face. The room went silent after that. Not dramatic silence. Worse. The kind where two people hear the actual shape of what happened and one of them can no longer hide inside gentler wording. Ryan leaned back and looked at me with a kind of stunned anger like the furniture had started speaking. You want to throw me out, he said finally. I held his gaze. I want you to understand that you do not get to publicly phase me out of my own life and then come home expecting the walls to stay on your side. He laughed once short and ugly. You're unbelievable. No, I said. I've been extremely believable. That's the whole problem. I've been so believable as your support system that you forgot I was a person. He stood up. So what, Emily? What exactly do you want? I stood too. My heart was pounding now, but not in that helpless way from the recital. This felt different, cleaner, not easy, just true. I want you out of this house tonight. He stared at me. For a few days, he said. For now, I said, long enough for this to stop being managed like a misunderstanding and start being treated like what it is. His face changed again. I saw the exact second he realized I was not bluffing, and beneath that the worse realization this house was not the one place he could rely on bending around him. You're really doing this, he said. I thought of Sophie in her white tights asking me in the car if she should have waved at both of them. I thought of my mother's inheritance turning into kitchen counters and mortgage statements and years of making Ryan's instability look temporary. I thought of Claire standing in that fluorescent school hallway while my daughter tried to read the room from a stage. No, I said quietly. You did this. I'm stopping it. For a second I thought he might argue harder, yell, try one last round of tone and blame. Instead, something smaller happened and it told me more than any explosion would have. He looked around the kitchen, at the counters, the table, the school calendar on the fridge, Sophie's rain boots by the back door, the lamp I always left on over the sink. He looked at the life as if he were seeing maybe for the first time how much of it had my fingerprints on it. Then he looked back at me and whatever he saw in my face must have convinced him that tonight was not a night he could talk his way around. He went upstairs without another word. I listened to him move through our bedroom. Drawers opening, hangers shifting, the zipper of his duffel bag. At one point he stopped long enough that I thought maybe he'd come back down and try again. He didn't. When he finally came down, he had an overnight bag in one hand and the stiff, exhausted expression of a man who had just discovered that consequences felt humiliating when they happened to him. At the door he paused. I never meant for Sophie to be upset, he said. That was the closest thing to remorse I was going to get. I nodded once. That's part of why you don't understand what you did. He left. I locked the door behind him, then leaned my forehead against it for a second longer than I meant to. I didn't cry right away. I walked through the house first, turned off the kitchen light, checked the downstairs windows, straightened the stack of documents at the table. It was almost funny, the old instinct to restore order after somebody else had broken it. Then I went upstairs and sat on the edge of Sophie's bed in the dark. She stirred a little when I touched her hair. Mom, she mumbled. I'm here. That was enough. She settled again. The next morning, the house felt bruised, but it also felt quieter in a way I hadn't realized I missed. Not happier, not fixed. Just no longer bending itself around someone else's denial. Sophie came into the kitchen in her socks while I was making toast. Her hair was sticking out on one side. She looked at the table, then at me. Is Daddy at work? I set the butter knife down. He's staying somewhere else for a little while. She absorbed that in the serious way kids absorb weather changes they can't control. Did I do something wrong? The ache of motherhood is how often you're asked to answer for damage you didn't create. I crouched in front of her. No, baby. None of this is because of you. She studied my face, then she said, Are you still coming to my music thing next month? I smiled before I could help it, even with everything in me still sore. Yes, I said. I'm still coming. She nodded satisfied and climbed into her chair. While the toast popped, I walked to the window over the sink. Our front yard was wet from overnight rain. Ryan's car was gone. Sophie's recital flower bag was still on the counter where I'd set it down after we came home. The tissue paper crumpled, the pink ribbon bent. I picked it up and smoothed the ribbon flat with my thumb. The house didn't feel like a trophy. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like something sadder and more important than that. It felt like the first place where I had finally told the truth before somebody else's version of me could harden permanently into fact. Behind me, Sophie started humming the same little recital tune she'd practiced 100 times in the living room. Soft, slightly off-key, totally unashamed. I stood there with the flour bag in my hands and listened to her sing in the kitchen. I had kept standing in the house I had paid to save, and for the first time in a long time I did not feel like I was disappearing inside my own life.